Now, Rev Fred, the CDP has proposed a 10-year moratorium on Islamic immigration. Now, why is the CDP so opposed to Islamic immigration? And I guess to ask the other question, and this is what a lot of people say nowadays, shouldn't we all just get along and respect everyone's religion? What's your response to that?
Well, it's a very serious matter, and I don't want to particularly be anti-Muslim, but a few years ago, as I was praying, and I'm involved with lots of issues, drugs, pornography, prostitution, a whole lot of controversial stuff, and as I was praying, God showed me quite clear, Fred, there is a #1 threat to Australia. I said, what's that? Islam. Actually, God gave me a burden, and I thought, what's that mean? I knew nothing about it, I knew general knowledge. So I asked a guy, one of these Coptic Christians, you got a copy of the Quran? I better read it. I better find out what it's all about. Because up till then, I was like most Christians, very naive, thinking that somehow Allah and God are the same, and that Muslims and Christians are going to heaven together, and that the Muslims think a lot about Jesus. Now, some of that's true. There are a lot of detail in the Quran about Jesus. He's treated with respect, but it repeats over and over again. This is what hit me when I read the Quran. Over and over again, it keeps saying, but Jesus Christ is not the Son of God. He's not the Son of God. He's a prophet of Islam, a prophet of Allah. He's just a man, just a prophet. And it's repeated over and over again in the Quran. And then I read the Bible, and you see in the New Testament it says, those who deny Christ as the Son of God is the Antichrist. I thought, now I've got a problem. I want to be friends with Muslims, because as a Christian I love Muslims. I love everybody. I love homosexuals. I love prostitutes. I love everybody. But God was saying to me, Fred, you've got to be very wary about this new threat facing Australia. And the reason why it's a threat, Islam, as distinct from Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism and so on, all the other religions are religions. They just want to live in Australia and have a peaceful life. And I agree with that. And I've supported them having equal rights to Christians, that they can have their worship day and all those sort of things in the industrial laws. But Islam is not a religion. Islam is more than religion. It's a religious political movement, which also has in it government. That Muslims, by their very doctrine, must rule. They cannot just be one denomination, one religion with other religions. They must rule. That's the teaching of Muhammad. And either rule over people voluntarily, or they'll come with a sword and say either you convert or you die. Now that's what's happening in Iraq today. Thousands of Christians have been murdered in Iraq. The Muslims come to their home saying, we're giving you a choice. Convert to Islam, or die, or leave. And when they say leave, they mean walk out. Leave your home, leave your possessions, leave your car, just walk out and become a refugee. And thousands of Christians in Iraq are doing that. Now I don't want that to happen to Australia. Now the reason I feel very concerned about this is because we already see the problems in the UK, in Holland, in Denmark, in Sweden. They all now have major social problems. The Muslims are now exerting themselves, standing up, making their demands. In England they want to have their own courts. They're talking about having polygamy. In fact, one leader here in Sydney this week said, we want polygamy legalised in Australia. We want to have it that we can have 4 wives. We want you to change your laws. Now, no other religion does it. They just come to Australia and they just accept our rules. They accept our values. They accept the fact they're living in a Christian nation. The Muslims don't do that. The Muslims say we have to change it. So that's a dilemma. So then you have this force then at work. Now, when it's a small population, at the moment it's 1.5% Muslim. All the other religions in Australia, excluding Christianity, add up to 5%. Buddhists, Hindus, all that. Only 5%, 1.5%. So you could say, well, it's only 1.5%. What's the problem? But Punchbowl and Bankstown, it's 20% already. It is 20%. And by rule, once the Muslim percentage gets up like to 5%, 10%, then they, by their religious doctrine, have to make demands, have to say, this is what we want, and we want it, or else. It becomes a threat. And now that's what's happening in Europe, and it's causing great trouble. So I've said, let's have the moratorium for 10 years. In the meantime, let the government send over a high-powered task force to Europe, go to the UK, go to Denmark, go to Holland, find out what's happening there, what are the problems, come back to Australia and say, we're going to prevent those problems. We're not going to get in the same pathway. And the second thing we have to do is talk to the Muslim leadership here and say to them, we're sorry guys, we know it's in your Quran, we know it's in your doctrine, but you're not going to impose Islam in Australia. We want you to agree to that. We want you to agree to accept that you will be only one of many religions in Australia. You will never be the dominant one, you're never going to control Australia, you're not going to try and set up an Islamic state in Australia. Now the other day when they showed Atlee out at the Kemba, had a delegation from the government come there, he actually said, I welcome you to the Islamic Republic of the Kemba. Now you could say, oh, he was just joking. I don't think he was joking at all. I think he thought, I've already established a little miniature Islamic state here in Sydney, and I want it to grow and grow. So the only way we can stop it growing dramatically is to put a moratorium on the immigration. And the next question, of course, is population growth. Muslim families in Australia, their birth rate is 6.8%. That's the official figures. There'll be some where they're having 12 children, but the average is 6.8. What's the average for non-Muslims? 1.7. We don't even replace the 2 people who die. It's got to be at least 2.2 for a population to keep replacing itself and growing. If we had no immigration, our population would decline. Our birth rate is only 1.7, plus we have 100,000 abortions a year, and those aborted babies are being replaced with 120 new migrants coming to the country, and that gives us our increased population, plus our birth rate is now starting to increase, which is very encouraging. So that's the reason why I think we should have a moratorium. It sends a message to the Muslims, they have to set their own house in order. They have to change their attitude. And I thank God, I've met many Muslim leaders, I've had many meetings, I've had meetings only in the past few weeks with them at the big Muslim school at Greenacre, at Palmer, and I share these things with them, and the ones I'm talking to actually agree with me. They actually say, look Fred, that's what we want. We want to have cooperation, dialogue, toleration, celebration, and so on. Now they may be genuine, some people say they're not. I believe some of them are genuine and want to work with us and put to one side this militant fundamentalism that is the cause of the problem. But as you know, in the last few months we've had a number of terrorist threats in Australia where these fundamental Muslims want to attack the Holsworthy Army camp and said that we can kill a whole lot of soldiers. They've not even got guns, there's no security except a civilian security officer on the gates, and they could have done that, except that they were discovered by our security intelligence people. And there's another group on trial in the Penrith court that they were planning another terrorist attack. So these court cases show it's a real threat. It's happening in America, it happened in the UK where they blew the buses up, the trains up. We had the attacks on the Twin Towers in New York with Bin Laden's suicide men who were willing to fly a plane full of passengers straight into a skyscraper. Now they're the fundamentalists, they're the danger to Australia. So we must do all we can to reduce the numbers of those fundamentalists.